Hey everyone, so before we get into today's video, I want to take a minute to talk about an organization that I am partnering with, the Raiden Science Foundation. The Raiden Science Foundation is a research organization aiming to overcome traditional research by finding advanced treatment for UBA5 disorder, a debilitating and ultra-rare genetic disease. This is an ultra-rare genetic disease with about 50 diagnosed children worldwide. This leads to limited research within the field of medicine, but that's not going to stop the Raiden Science Foundation, as the research they're accelerating today will have a scalable impact across other rare diseases tomorrow. And they've even partnered with several other fighting game community members, such as Maximilian Dude. I've had the wonderful opportunity to speak with Tommy about this organization, and his son, Raiden's story impacted me so much that I wanted to do something about it with you all. By visiting the link down below, you can make your contribution and donate to the organization today. Your donation will help advance scientific discoveries and cures for stuff like UBA5. I'm really happy to be partnering with the Raiden Science Foundation, and all future videos and live streams will have this link implemented into either the description or in the overlay for my live streams. Together, we can be the spark of hope that can help people with unpopular opinions. We all have them, and so do I. I actually did a video on this a few years ago, which you should totally check out. Recently, I made a community tab, a Twitter post, and a Blue Sky post asking what your unpopular opinions about Mortal Kombat are, and I'm going to be reacting to some of them based on just how interesting they are, how much they just disagree with what a lot of people think of, and just how interesting I think they are. So with that, let's take a look at some of your takes and let's have a fun discussion about them.
Fight!
Now, before we get into this actual video, I'm just going to be looking at some of them, responding based off of like what community reception is, if it really is a hot take, a lukewarm take, or cold take, and then just kind of really just understand where you're coming from, and also just see if I like agree with you on some of these takes. A lot of these submissions I've seen are very interesting, and I just want to say again, thank you so much for posting something. It really means a ton. And on top of that, I know that these are opinions, and a lot of people have varying different opinions on these topics and just everything regarding Mortal Kombat. So if you do see an unpopular opinion you don't agree with, please don't go out of your way to harass this person or individual. We're allowed to disagree on things, so let's please be civil about it. And with that, let's get into them. Kicking it off and looking at YouTube takes, this coming from I Like Pop-Tarts, saying that guest characters are dumb now. I would actually disagree with this one because I do think the guest characters we've gotten have actually been pretty good, even if they're the weirdest choices. Like sure, Kombat Pack 2 was the first one without a unique theme, where MK9 was Freddy Krueger, MKX was horror, MK11 was 90s action, and then Kombat Pack 1 was anti-heroes. Even if the selections we got didn't match a theme, I would say they're some of the most fun characters that have joined the roster in MK1. Historically, I don't think any of the guest characters are bad or dumb. I just think that like the choice or selection is what's the most interesting, but I don't think they're dumb though. I've got 4 that are kind of gelling with the same opinion here, and it's that Stryker and D'Vorah are actually cool and underrated characters. First, tackling Stryker. When he was introduced in the 90s, he was probably added because there were some games that were focusing around police officers that were big in the 90s, such as like Narc for an example, so having a cop archetype does make sense back in the day. However, when you just look at the moveset, and I can see why some people find him a bland character because he's just a dude with a gun and nothing supernatural or crazy over the top, which is why he doesn't really stand out a whole lot compared to like these supernatural and elemental ninjas and cyber ninjas, stuff like that. But I do understand where some people do really like the character because he's just a simple guy. For me personally, I wish they would do something a little bit more unique, maybe make him more like super cop-esque or some like agent or something to make him stand out a little bit, because I think he's a little bit too bland of a character. It was honestly nice seeing him come back in MK1 as a cameo, getting some representation, but if they're gonna bring him back in a modern way, I would like to see some approach like what they did with MK9, modernize him a little bit and make him a bit cooler, because back in the day, I did not like this character a whole lot. And when it comes to Devora, because two of these people here actually mentioned Devora, I do think having a weird, creepy bug chick is really cool. But I think the reason people really do hate Devora is because of how she was handled in the story by killing Scorpion and Melina. Oh, spoilers, by the way. Yeah, I think that's really the only real hate that she gets, but outside of that, I always thought she was a cool and crazy inclusion. Just a very creepy character to include into this very diverse world of Mortal Kombat. Next up is that guest characters are great. Yeah, I do agree with this one, but I agree to an extent. As long as they fit the universe and as long as they play well, then I feel like that they justified their spot. I know a lot of people are very anti-guest characters. I've seen that in my comments for quite some time, but I do think that they really bring in like a casual audience who really doesn't care about Mortal Kombat, but it's cool to see that Ghostface is in Mortal Kombat or something like that. And I do agree that even though that like Conan and Ghostface are like very interesting picks, they are two of the most fun characters and heavily popular in terms of gameplay. So yeah, if they can at least execute the guest characters and make them cool, then I think they deserve a spot. Our next take, I unironically think that Natara's voice in MK1 is great. Yeah, if you went back to like around the launch of Mortal Kombat 1, it was hard to avoid that everyone was memeing on Megan Fox's voice performance. Even when I did all celebrity voice actors ranked from worst to best, Megan Fox's Natara was at number 9. And from what I did state in that performance, there are some parts where she sounds like she's doing a good job, but other parts it sounds like she didn't deliver it as well, or she's overacting. Now personally, I wouldn't say she's really good, but I would say there are a handful of lines that sound like she's actually giving it her all, such as like the "I'll steal Tatusha and kill you with it." I thought she sounded great, but I think there are a little too many lines where it felt like, okay, do you want to try that take again? Could have been said. But if you like a performance, that's cool. Our next take, Armageddon was a great game and it's really overhated. I don't think you're alone in that one. There are a lot of people I know who love Armageddon. Growing up, I thought it was an awesome game, and revisiting it, I still think it's a blast. I don't think it's the best Mortal Kombat game, and I do see a lot of issues with it, but I do think what makes it super fun is the creative fighter aspect, and I think that's the part that people love the most. Now, it's completely unbalanced and you can completely break the game, but I think it was an awesome treat to play as every single character in Mortal Kombat history at that point, minus a Hornbuckle and Tremor. But in terms of what the game offered, the amount of characters, and the story mode, I thought it was a fun time. Definitely a great game, you're not alone there. Our 7th take, I'm lumping these 3 together because they talk about a similar topic, and it's preferring the NRS games over the Midway era, and even stating that nostalgia for the Midway era is not making the NRS era bad. Now to that, I do agree with you there. There is always some preference when it comes to some games. I know a lot of people who grew up with the Midway games are probably going to prefer it more as it's one that they've grown up with and it's one that they have more nostalgia for. But that doesn't mean that the new era is bad. Honestly, I would say they both have different mechanics, different characters, different stories, and just a lot of different content that caters to different audiences. I do like the Midway era a lot, and I do like the NRS era a lot, but I know that they cater to different audiences. I don't think they're bad, and I do think they have their strengths in some different areas. But lately, reading stuff online, I do see people saying that the Midway era is better, just how it handled some of the characters, or even some of the content. I think both eras are good, they both just check different boxes for different audiences, and I don't think that's a problem. Our next one comes from Dragon Film, saying that people hate on the cameo system way too much. Now, I do agree with you on this one. I do think it's really overhated, and I do think it's actually really fun. I think where a lot of the hatred for this mode does come from is that people wanted a tag team mode like in MK9 rather than just assists coming in like in Marvel vs. Capcom Classic. I also thought this was a wonderful opportunity to get characters that they wouldn't want to make like full playable characters but acknowledge characters from the past, like as I mentioned Stryker or even Farah being their own character who can just help in the middle of the fight. Do I think it was perfectly executed? No, I don't think it really was. Some characters are way too overpowered compared to other cameos, but I think it's a wonderful system that was included. Also, another thing, I think people also wish that there was a mode to toggle this on or off, and I do agree. I do think it should have been toggled, but I don't think it should be outright removed. I think it's a cool idea, and maybe it could be tinkered with a little bit better in the future, or at least just make a tag option in the future. But once again, I do agree. I think it does get way too much hate than it deserves. Our next take focuses on the fatalities, stating that they should focus more on creativity and style, and less on the gruesomeness for each fatality. Yes, I do think they should have more of an emphasis on this, or at least if anything have a nice balance of shock value with creativity. Like for an example, Reiko's fatality in MK1, it's over the top and gruesome, but it's also extremely creative and gross. But yet some of my favorite stylish finishers are like Kenshi's, where he lifts him in the air and creates that helicopter and they get shredded apart in it. That's cool. But a big example like MKX, where finishers are paced awkwardly, it seems like with the final shot they want to focus on the gruesomeness rather than like the style. Personally, I think some of the fatalities in MKX were a bit of a step down from MK9, but I still think they were fine. I would rather like to see more of an emphasis on some over-the-top creativity instead of over-the-top gore, which would be a huge blessing for Mortal Kombat content creators, as it would prevent age restrictions. Our 10th hot take is saying that you should subscribe to the channel. No, that's not really a hot take, that is just something you should be doing, so please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, it truly means a ton. Now let's move on to my Discord for more hot takes. Also, if you want to join my Discord, please check the link in the description below. Taking a look at a take from Meta, and this is that the idea of guest characters is becoming more and more predictable and not as exciting, specifically mentioning that it peaks with MKX, and yes, I do agree with you there. And a big reason I feel like this hype or it's less exciting nowadays is because these games get cracked way too early, meaning that the guest character lineup and DLC lineup tend to be leaked way before the game even launches. Like, we knew that Spawn was going to be in Mortal Kombat 11 months before his announcement trailer, and then as soon as Mortal Kombat 1 was announced, we found out the entire DLC lineup. Now, I'm not saying that Mortal Kombat needs to do a move like Tekken 8 by getting Clive Rossfield, a character that probably wouldn't fit and just seems like a far to left field pick, but I would like to have these guest character picks feel more unpredictable moving forward. We've got two from Grand Finals Entertainment saying that the Crypt was the only good part of MK11 and Invasions was the worst and laziest content NRS has ever put into a game. I'd say both of those are a little bit extreme, but I can somewhat agree to an extent. I do think that the Crypt was a huge improvement over the PS2 era ones, and honestly over the MKX Crypt. I like how it actually felt like you were going on an adventure, and there was so much you could do in there. Outside of just getting combat coins for rewards like you did in MKX, it seemed like the characters you played as in 11 actually contributed a lot to what you could do in MK11, along with finding a bunch of fun secrets and collectibles. Definitely one of the biggest highlights of the game, but I wouldn't really say it's the only good part of the game. And when it comes to Invasions, I do think when it came to the first few seasons of Invasions, I thought it was very lackluster and pretty disappointing. It took until towards the end of the Invasion seasons where it felt like they finally hit their stride, but I do feel like early on it felt lazy and sloppily put together, just needed a lot more time in the oven and needed something to at least compete with Street Fighter 6's World Tour. Honestly, now I'm just trying to imagine a World Tour Mortal Kombat edition. That would be awesome and dope. From Cobra Kai, I think Drummond and Moloch are among the coolest Mortal Kombat characters if they had just been implemented properly. Don't even get me started, I think these characters are designed super cool. I do agree that they need to be implemented better. When I found out that Havoc was going to be one of the big villains showing up in Mortal Kombat 1, along with like a very dark side of the peaceful world of Mortal Kombat 1, I was hoping one of those characters that would appear would have been Drummond or Moloch, especially with the technology that we have now, along with more 3D characters being added to Mortal Kombat 1. I thought bringing him back would have been so awesome. And I do agree that we do need more beast characters coming back in some way. Like, we don't really have any big hulking characters anymore, and I think Moloch would be able to fit that if they implemented him correctly. But I do agree, visually and in terms of like how they could be executed, Drummond and Moloch should get some attention in the future. From Ayame Combo, Bald Sub-Zero is a top 3 design that surpasses Shredder Zero if we consider he sacrificed his hair to be the strongest cryomancer in history. Whew, as someone who is a Sub-Zero fan, this is one that I cannot agree with. I am so sorry. If you haven't seen my all costumes ranked for Sub-Zero, this was at the very bottom. I just think it looks really off in general, and I can't really tell if this is bait or not. I don't know if you're just messing with me, but if it is bait, you did a real good one getting at me. From Charisse, Devora was done dirty in MK11, and for her fiance, Kung Lao would have been a better protagonist than Liu Kang. First off, with Devora being done dirty in MK11, yeah, I do kind of agree there. It felt like she took a little bit of a back seat in the story. She didn't really have that much time to shine outside of the one moment in the story where she killed Scorpion, but I felt like she didn't do a whole lot in the story except for turn her loyalty to Kotal Khan to Shao Kahn. I feel like fans got really pissed after finding out that she killed Melina in MKX, and they decided to just kind of have her dial it back a little bit. Now, when it came to Kung Lao being a better protagonist than Liu Kang, I think a lot of it could be just because that Kung Lao has a lot more personality, and the fact that he's trying to avenge the great Kung Lao for killing Goro. I always wanted to imagine, like, especially in this new era, I thought that would have been an opportunity for Liu Kang handing the mantle to a Kung Lao to be the champion of Mortal Kombat once again, so I thought that's what we were going for, and I do wish that could have happened, because if we did get that outcome, I feel like he would have been a better protagonist, and it would have been a little bit more satisfactory that he gets to carry the mantle of the great Kung Lao, become the champion, and avenge his ancestor. Moving on to Twitter now for some takes, and this coming from Papa Jace, the deaths in MK9 should have stuck. Now, this one is quite interesting because if they did remain permanent, then that would mean that we wouldn't get the Revenant arc, which was a big complaint people had with MKX and 11. However, the only issue I do see if the deaths did stay permanent is that they would have to come up with new character archetypes to fill in the roles for characters like Sub-Zero, Cabal, Jade, and anyone else who became Revenants. In terms of like the narratives and gripes people had when it came to the Revenants, I do agree with this, but when it comes to like filling new roles to have people play the roles of the functions, that's where I think we would get the hiccup with it. But I would like to explore some world where MKX was actually a game that didn't have Revenants and the people who died stayed dead. Here's another one talking about guest characters from Long John Cena, saying that guest characters are cool, and tagged in by KGE. I do agree, but in moderation, like a maximum of 4 guest characters. I've said this in the past and I'll say it again, I do not have a problem with guest characters entering fighting games, as it helps get an audience who is not interested or invested in that fighting game finally play it and check it out because it includes a character that they like. Do I think all of the characters that have been added in Mortal Kombat have been hits? No, I think there are a handful of misses, but I don't think any of them are outright terrible or bad. I do think as the games have gone on with MK11 and MK1, we have gotten a lot of guest characters filling up the DLC roster, and I would like to see that toned down just slightly. Our next one, a real MK fan would rather appreciate an OG MK character as a DLC over these licensed characters. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I would appreciate some original characters coming back, but I do get the appeal when it comes to guest characters if done correctly. Yes, I've been a fan since I was a kid playing UMK3 on the PS1, and there are some characters I would love to see make a return as DLC. But at the same time, I would love to see Doomslayer or Ash Williams in Mortal Kombat. Those are the top 2 guests I would freak out over the most. So if we manage to get those 2 characters over someone like Draman Hataru or Kintaro, I wouldn't be upset, as I know getting the license to those characters is extremely hard and it would be worth it, knowing their track record implementing guest characters. From Real Venom Fortnite, I think female Sector and Cyrax was a cool take on the characters. And yeah, I've said the same thing in the past too, you're not alone there. Once again, it's multiversal shenanigans. We're allowed to get crazy and do some weird stuff, like we're allowed to have a human reptile, or we're able to have a timeline where Scorpion and Sub-Zero are brothers. I think this is one that people got really triggered over for some kind of dumb reasons, honestly. Like, we're allowed to have different outcomes because it's a multiverse. We're allowed to experiment with some characters, and we've also seen weird stuff like Cyber Sub-Zero. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, I thought it was cool that they've done something like that. Overall, we're allowed to do goofy stuff with some characters, characters as long as it's somewhat reasonable. Like if we decided to make them weird monsters or zombies or something like that, that's a little bit too far. I think people freaked out way too much because of a gender swap. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. Hey, it's awesome to hear from you, from Sonic HXD. I've had a lot of fun with Shaolin Monks, but it's not the perfect side game people claim it to be. There's tons of glitches, the story sucks balls. A remake would be awesome, but a remaster is enough to help smooth out a lot of minor issues. First off, thank you so much for placing one in here. Big fan of your stuff. And secondly, yeah, I do agree. I do love it a lot, but I don't think it's the perfect game. Replaying it with my brother and a few of my friends, there are plenty of issues that I do have with this one. Yeah, it hasn't aged the best, there are a lot of exploits you can make, and it's a bit janky here and there, but I do agree that I think like a remaster would be awesome to see. Maybe include it in some Mortal Kombat PS2 era collection, or do some deluxe remaster like what they did with Dead Rising, which was a good way to address some of the minor issues or exploits that were in the previous game, while keeping a lot of the core bones and components of the game as well. But yeah, I do agree, the story can be a bit goofy, such as how Shang Tsung disguises himself as Raiden and tells everyone to go on a murder spree, which is just what powers up Shang Tsung. Like, how did they not know that something was going on? Like, the next time they saw Raiden, like, hey, didn't you tell us to do this? Like, there are a few plot holes that could have been addressed there, but I think people ignore it because they were having so much dumb fun with it. Having it come back on modern platforms is something I would love to see the Mortal Kombat team do down the line. Also, if you ever want to collab down the line, please let me know, I'd love to do that. From friend of the channel, The Uncommon Oddity, Mortal Kombat Special Forces is nowhere near as bad as people say. I do think that it is a little bit overhyped of how bad it is because it was regarded as one of the worst games of all time. It was in a few lists for the worst PS1 games of all time, and after seeing something given that title, you would go in thinking it's terrible, but after playing it, you are right, it is just painfully average and it's not great. I think what really sucks is we found out what we didn't get and what was scrapped, which could have made the game pretty cool. But unfortunately, I still think it is the worst of the Mortal Kombat games, if you're including mainline and spin-off. From another Nick, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion, but Kung Lao needs to sit his ass out for a game. Yeah, I feel like he has that same status similar to like Sonya Blade and Jax, where he doesn't need to be there every single time, but he is one of those characters that will have a spot here and there. I think because he's competitively viable, I think that's why he will make it in no matter what. But if anything, I wish they did something different instead of cameo Kung Lao and base roster Kung Lao for MK1. I think they could have done something different a little bit there. And I do agree with your comment, I do wish Kai made it back in some way too. Bro is someone who really needs to be reworked or reimagined in some way. From Amoral, MK11 is a good game. Most of the fighting mechanics like crushing blows and gauges add depth to the gameplay. The Towers of Time can be grindy but still enjoyable. I think people dislike the game for its awful story. Crazy enough, I have kind of the opposite reaction to this one. I actually thought the story was a huge highlight for the game, along with the crypt as I mentioned earlier. Now when it comes to the gameplay, I thought the crushing blows were a good idea, but I think they could have been implemented a little bit better in terms of mechanics. Like, I feel a lot of this game does weigh heavy on just waiting for your opponent to make some mistake and you can get a huge opportunity for massive damage that just feels a little gimmicky. Like, it should be a little weird that you can get 20% with a down 2, or you can do about 50% if you time your combo correctly by just doing a third enhanced ice slide with Sub-Zero. Like, cinematically it looks really cool, but how it's executed in terms of damage, it was not scaled the best. I will say though, Towers of Time was a good idea. It was a good way to rework the living towers from MKX, and it was also cool to see it come back in MK1. From Daigo, okay, actual hot take, I hate how they're making MK more realistic looking with each new game. Call me Lay Seraphim cause this does sound crazy, but I do agree with you here. I honestly would love to see Mortal Kombat tackle a different art style, maybe something like Samurai Showdown, where it can do some very bloody art, but still make it not look super realistic, and it also gives an opportunity to make the blood look different, the gore look a little bit bit different and not too realistic where it can be hard for some viewers. I would honestly love to see like a spin-off Mortal Kombat title do something like that. So yeah, no worries Daigo, you're not alone. From Stan Marsh, Tor should come back as a fighter. Yeah, similar to what I said earlier about Moloch and Draman, I would love to see some weird monster-like or beast characters appear. Now, even though that Tor didn't have that much of a personality because it was primarily carried by Farah, but it was cool to see a giant hulking monster inspired by Master Blaster in Mortal Kombat. I also would like to just see a grappler archetype come back in a very unique way that's not Jax. Tor definitely deserves some more time in the spotlight. From the poor guy, the create a fatality system in MK Armageddon was ahead of its time, and some people just hated it back in the day because they were just lazy to learn the chains and transitions. I do sort of agree with you on this one here. Back in the day, I did think that this was really cool that you could make every single fatality feel unique, and it had some nice element to it as they use their own weapon, and you can change up the style based on the transitions and just what you can do with it, as you had mentioned. I do think a lot of the hatred does also come from the fact that a lot of the characters do express themselves through fatalities, and the fact that many of them can feel the exact same is an issue. I still think that the option is cool that you can create one. I just think if they had tackled this again down the line, maybe treating it like a create your own super in like a WWE game, that would be really cool. Very time consuming to develop, but it would definitely be worth it in the end if implemented correctly in a future title. From Gamer Dude, MK Trilogy's aggressor mechanic is pretty cool. While not the best mechanic, the effects from it were pretty sweet. Also, the MKX crypt is still the best crypt. Yeah, aggressor is really cool. I also do like how it was a unique mechanic just to Trilogy, something to separate itself from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 outside of an expanded roster. Hopefully it could be implemented into a future title. And yeah, the MKX crypt was really cool. I do wish more people talked about it, and I do like how it had more of like a dungeon crawler aspect to it. Maybe that's a good video idea I could do down the line, just the evolution of the Mortal Kombat crypt. And our last take we'll be looking at today comes from True Underdog. People who actively attack fans of classic or revealing costumes are not longtime fans. Yeah, that just makes sense. There's nothing wrong with that at all. There's just people who just have nostalgia for classic costumes. And I know there's an audience of people who like it because it's just hot. And if you like it, that's cool. If you don't like it, that's cool. Just don't be an asshole about it. You're allowed to like MK9 Melina or even the Flesh Pits costume of Melina. And you're even allowed to like the new Era one. Like whatever you want. I don't care. Just don't attack other people for liking a costume. That's just kind of childish and dumb. Also, it's great to hear from you again, True Underdog. And there's my reaction to a bunch of your hot takes or unpopular opinions about the Mortal Kombat franchise. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to every single one of them. There were a overwhelming number of them and so many diverse ones, but I would love to do a part 2 and continue the discussion talking about more unpopular opinions and just talk more about some of these, because a lot of the ones that I've read were very interesting and I'd love to dive deep into them and create more of a discussion with you guys in the comment section. If you do have any more unpopular opinions you'd like to talk about, please share them in the comment section down below or share them with me on my Twitter or Blue Sky. I would love to reach out to you there or keep the discussion going there. If you are new to the channel, please consider dropping a like, subscribing, and sharing this video. It truly means a ton, and let's keep the channel growing. As always, thank you so much for your continuous support. My name is Nick, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Fight!
UBA 5. Thank you, and let's get to the video.